They couldn't believe one man controlled the world's oil supply. Not because he discovered oil. He didn't. Not because he led armies or ruled nations. He never held public office. He did something more modern and more dangerous. He built a system so efficient, so ruthless, and so complete that it bent markets, squeezed competitors out of existence, and forced governments to change the rules of business forever. This is the story of John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil, the rise of a monopoly that remade the modern world. In the mid-1800s, lighting homes and businesses was an expensive business. Whale oil still lit many lamps, a gruesome and costly industry. Then came kerosene, derived from petroleum, cheaper and cleaner for burning. The energy system of the day was in flux, and where industries reshaped the market, fortunes were made. Among the young men watching this shift was John Davison Rockefeller, born July 8, 1839, in Richford, New York, a quiet, calculating Midwesterner who believed in order, numbers, and above all, efficiency. By the 1860s, Rockefeller had already learned two crucial lessons. One, that refining oil could be far more profitable than prospecting for it. And two, that if you controlled refining, you could influence the entire chain of supply, from crude to candle flame. In 1870, Rockefeller and a small group of partners incorporated Standard Oil Company of Ohio. From the beginning, Rockefeller's aim was not merely to run a good refinery. It was to reduce costs, raise efficiency, and capture market share until competitors could no longer compete. How did he do it? First, horizontal integration. Rockefeller bought out rival refineries, sometimes by offering cash, sometimes by undercutting prices until the rivals sold. By combining refineries under one umbrella, he eliminated duplication, standardized processes, and pushed margins higher. Second, ruthless negotiation with the railroads. The country's lifeblood for heavy industry was the railroad. Rockefeller extracted secret rebates and preferential rates, meaning Standard could ship oil more cheaply than any competitor. Those inside the industry whispered that railroads were not giving rebates to companies. They were giving them to Mr. Rockefeller. Third, secret deals and differential pricing. Standard frequently gave the same rail carrier a choice: lower rates for Standard and punitive rates for its rivals. The result: competitors paid more to move the same oil or could not ship it at all. Over time, those who could not match Rockefeller's terms were forced to sell or vanish. Fourth, integration across the supply chain. Standard didn't merely refine. It controlled storage, pipelines, shipping, and retail distribution. It was a vertically interlocked machine that squeezed inefficiency out at every stage. By the 1880s, Standard Oil's grip on the industry was enormous. The company organized itself into trusts in 1882, an innovation where many companies' stocks were transferred to a small group of trustees who then controlled them. To the public, the trust was the face of monopoly, one central power that coordinated formerly independent businesses. Standard's market share grew until, in many accounts of the time, it controlled as much as 90% of U.S. refining capacity. That meant Standard could, in practice, set prices, not by decree, but by control of supply and distribution. Price wars, secret rebates, and the relentless buyouts had a chilling effect. Independent refiners found it harder and harder to operate. Local retailers and kerosene consumers found their options narrowing. And so, opposition grew. Journalists and reformers began to scrutinize Standard's methods. Ida Tarbell, one of the earliest and most influential muckrakers, published a blistering, serialized investigation into Standard Oil that depicted Rockefeller as a calculating monopolist who had crushed competition to build a corporate empire. The public reaction was visceral. For a democratic society, the idea that a single private firm could exercise such economic power felt intolerable. On the legislative front, the United States passed the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1890, a law designed to prohibit restraints of trade. It was broad, blunt, and at first ineffective. The law's language would need to be tested in courts before it could be made sharp. That test arrived in the early 20th century. Under the leadership of President Theodore Roosevelt and later William Howard Taft, the federal government grew more willing to use the Sherman Act against trusts. Standard Oil became a headline case. In 1906, the U.S. Department of Justice brought suit against Standard Oil. The case unfolded through a decade of legal battles and public scrutiny, culminating in a decisive moment before the nation's highest court. On May 15, 1911, the Supreme Court of the United States delivered a landmark decision. Standard Oil was to be found in violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. The company, once a single behemoth, was ordered to be divided into 34 independent companies. The ruling did not destroy Rockefeller's fortune overnight. Instead, it redistributed the business lines into companies that later became names we recognize today: Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, Amoco among them. Rockefeller, at the time, quietly adjusted holdings and by some measures remained among the wealthiest men in the world. But the spirit of the decision was unmistakable. Unchecked private economic power could be curtailed by law. Perhaps the most surprising chapter came after the breakup. John D. Rockefeller, who had always been intensely private and deeply religious, turned much of his attention to philanthropy. He financed medical research, universities, public health initiatives, and eventually founded the Rockefeller Foundation in 1913. This pivot complicates the narrative. The man who amassed unprecedented private power also helped create public goods that transformed medicine, education, and science across the globe. Why does this 19th century tale still matter? Because Standard Oil is not merely a story about barrels and refineries. It is a story about how markets can be captured, how institutions respond, and how societies decide what private power is acceptable. The legal responses forged in the era of Standard Oil, the Sherman Act, the legal tests applied by courts, remain the backbone of antitrust law today. They are the same tools deployed against modern giants, whether they vend gas or digital services. And there's a lesson about global markets, too. Oil was the first commodity to become truly global in its economic and strategic importance. Whoever controlled its flow influenced prices across continents, shaped industrialization, and, later, fueled the geopolitics of the 20th century. So when we ask whether one man controlled the world's oil supply, the answer is complicated. Rockefeller did not own every well, every tanker, every lamp. But through architecture, finance, and a willingness to be ruthless within the bounds of the law, and sometimes beyond it, he created a structure that could, in effect, dictate prices and access. That concentrated power shocked a democratic society and forced it to write new rules. From Standard Oil, we take two enduring truths. 1. Markets can concentrate power until they threaten competition itself. And 2. Law and public will can, sometimes haltingly, sometimes belatedly, reassert the public interest. If this history grabbed you, if you want more deep-dive narratives about the people and systems that shaped our modern world, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Tell us in the comments, which modern company reminds you most of Standard Oil, and should we treat them the same way? Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.